Instead of a dumpster fire this week, we did something different. We did an AMA. So in our PHETASY.com community, people submit their questions, and I answered them in video format. And we're going to break it up into different segments and just post it throughout the week. All of our subscribers will obviously be getting the full unedited version on PHETASY.com. Please sign up and join that community. Otherwise, enjoy. And thank you for watching. And Dumpster Fire will be back next week. Don't worry, for Super Tuesday. Anna asked, when did I first share my writing and what made me do it? I think the first time I shared it was with you, Maggie, cousin Maggie.
I still remember the first thing I ever read of Bridget's, which was this little one-off sheet of paper that she had written called My Stupid Goddamn Generation.
This was written, I wrote this thing, My Stupid Goddamn Generation, in response to my dad taking me out to breakfast and asking me, I was probably 22, and he asked me, what's wrong with your stupid goddamn generation? I was like, you know what, Dad? I'll tell you what's wrong with our stupid goddamn generation. And so I wrote that.
Yeah, I feel like you were younger, because I feel like I remember reading it when I was in my teens, late teens.
Oh, yeah. Well, I wrote it when I was... Okay, yeah, so I
think it was when I was a junior and we were spending all of our time together because you were living in Rhode Island.
Yeah, that was... Okay, you're right. That was written when I was like 19.
Right.
Or 18.
And I just remember reading it and A, being blown away by like what a writer you are, but B, being like, this is everything I've ever wanted to express about how I feel about my stupid goddamn generation, and you nailed it.
And it was man, I did nail it. I still have it. And it was basically all about all the crumbling institution. And so why wouldn't you have a generation of people who don't see any meaning and don't know what to trust if they can't trust any of the institutions, religion, school. I think I shared then that erotica story that I wrote erotica, which was like one of the earlier things I wrote.
And say like a really good erotica piece. And I remember reading that.
And I was like, Maggie's the only one I can show this to.
And then you told me, you were like, wow, you'd be a really good editor. That was when you kind of like put that in my head.
Yeah, Maggie was my first editor, because I didn't have an editor. And Maggie, I trusted her judgment as more than just a cousin telling me that my writing was good, because you're such a voracious reader.
Right.
And you read more than anyone I know. And so if you thought my writing was good, I was like, well, it can't be total shit, because I'm pretty sure Maggie's hierarchy of needs is like water and food and then reading. So I feel like it's so sacred that you wouldn't lie about it.
No, I definitely wouldn't.
And so that was another reason that I felt like I could trust you. But then you also do have such a good ear from all of that reading and memory for story, which I do not have, which is... So for those of you who don't know, if you haven't watched our South Park, Maggie and I write non-scripted stuff. We have non-scripted ideas for television shows. Scripted and non-scripted. But we have scripted ideas for television shows and movies and all kinds of things. And Maggie's writing a book. Some of you might not know this about Maggie.
Attempting.
You're still on the way.
Working on it.
And so that was when. And then I had the column.
Right. But you let me like read all your journals too. I remember over the years, just we would be lying in bed and like reading your journals and dying laughing about
I should really just try and get my journals published, because they're freaking hilarious. They really are. I always say if I could write as fearlessly and self-aware and hilariously as I do in my journals, I would be like a famous writer. Because it's just so honest.
So honest. But you're always so like, you still have that incisive like wit and cynicism, and you always like, you never fail to make the joke when it's there, even when it's in your journal.
Even when it's tragic.
Even when it's pointed at yourself.
And I personalize my journal, so I'm like, hello, journal. I know you've probably missed me. like it's a person. Which makes it fun. And then, so that was that. You were the first person, and I don't really know why. I feel
like we were going through stuff. I remember just coming across it and being like, what's this?
It's funny. I don't know. I always wanted to be a writer when I was little. And then I wanted to be an actress when I got older. That's why I came to LA when I was 19. And it didn't occur to me that I could be a writer. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that you could do that. And I think I'd given up on those dreams, and then I just wanted to be a creative or whatever. But I don't know why. I don't know. It was pretty much when I started writing for Buddyhead again, and I got that internship, and I saw what a bunch of drunk idiots with a computer could do. And I was like, wow, I could totally do this. And they gave me a sex column. And I was the only girl working, the Buddyhead girl. And then I was doing interviews, and I kind of fell into journalism, and I fell into all of that. And it was like the dawn of the internet and blogging. So that changed the ability, because from there I just saw like there are no gatekeepers. I can I can do this. Like these were guys who were getting $1 million offers from Interscope and people for their gossip column. And they were like a guy from Idaho who figured out how to code and had a couple of musicians, and we were just writing from like a room. It was so game changing. I mean, kids now take it for granted how game changing it was to be at the dawn of the gates coming down. Like it was, and with YouTube in 2006 when that came, it was just like, what? You can just do this,
right?
Like,
and talk to
an audience, and you can find people, and we all take it so much for granted, and I never take this for granted. So that was when, and then I had a column in my small town, Gaffweirophobia, fear of crossing bridges, and we still have those. I did like 20 columns for my local paper,
some of them,
and then it took me another 10 years. Then I wanted to be a writer, and I started PHETASY.com, the original, and it was a blog, and I just wrote. I mean, I wrote for a decade on that site.
That was your 10,000 hours of really shaping.
The Steven Pinker idea. Who is it? It's the other one.
Guy who did Blink and
Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell says you need 10,000 hours to really hone your craft. And that's where I think that, I definitely put in my 10,000 hours there.
Yep.
And just all the scripts I wrote and rewrote for no reason at all. And I was trying to, and I was just hustling. There was an article today in The Guardian that came out that was all about how you can only be a writer if you have money. And I was like, fuck that.
That's bullshit.
I just hate that that's the message you're sending, and she basically at the end says like, well, you need another job to be able to support you. Yeah. You're an artist. And then she's like, America is no place to be an artist. I'm like, what are you fucking talking about? This is the greatest place to be an artist.
Right.
There are kids making millions of dollars on freaking TikTok. Where else in the world can you do this?
You just have to be willing to find the time. You have to be willing to sacrifice your leisure time.
Yeah. It was a dumb point. I mean, I understood what she was saying, but the bigger point that America is no place to be an artist. Like, I waited tables, trimmed weed, went to, what else did I do?
Taught yoga. Worked with autistic kids.
Worked with autistic kids. Folded boxes and for jewelry. I did all kinds of random crap, whatever I could do. And I was in LA. Like, you can do this. You just have to hustle. You just have to want it and be able to hustle. And it's not for everyone. I mean, I was saying this the other day. Some people need a more stable day job. And I ended up back in waitressing because at least it's stable money and I had control over my days. But it's not for everyone, that level of insecurity, for sure. And I definitely, you're not going to go out of the gates and be making your money as a writer. And even once you start making money as a writer, you're not always safe. That is the choice you're making as a freelance. It's a hard, long road with no security.
Right. And there are people who've gotten several books published who still have a day job. Like getting your book published is no guarantee that you're going to all of a sudden be able to support yourself as a writer.
Yeah. I mean, there's no guarantee, though, when you work in a corporate ladder that you're not going to get laid off. Right. There's no guarantees that you're going to make it home from your commute. There are no guarantees in life.
Right.
So figure out what you're giving up and what, do a cost-benefit analysis.
Is it worth it?
It was easy for me because I didn't have kids and mouths to feed either. So I could take risks that other people wouldn't take. And I would say take those when you're young and single and free.
Yep.
So.
Good question.
Anna, great question. I could talk about writing all day long. And I'm happy to, if people have the desire for to hear that story of how I did it and what my tips are, I'm happy to do a whole video just on like how to handle. I'm happy to do a whole series on how to be a freelancer.
Well, we should do a series of that. That would actually probably be very big on YouTube.
Because it's not an easy road, but it's totally doable.
All right. Next question from Curtis. I'd love to hear your thoughts on writing in all forms. What is the business of writing for magazines like? What are the blockers for writing your book? How do you see yourself addressing those blocks? Curtis, you asked several questions, and we're only going to address one, your first one. I'd love to hear your thoughts on writing in all forms. What are your thoughts on writing, Bridget? Tell us, please.
I don't know. What are my thoughts on writing?
What is your relationship with writing?
Well, it saved my life. And if you put me in jail or on a desert island, I would still do it. And they said this to me in rehab, actually, when I was 19, the women that I talked about in an earlier question. They said you need to do exercise every day to stay sober. And I need to write. It just keeps me sane. And there's something weird. For me, it's not, so I can only speak to my experience, obviously, on writing. Everybody's is different. It is like breathing. It didn't even occur to me that I could be a writer because writing came so naturally. And it's one of those things where I was trying to be an actress, and all these things that were not necessarily natural were like when I was trying to be a photographer. Sometimes it is the thing that comes easily.
Right.
It just didn't occur to me because it came so easily that was something that I could do. And I still have a hard time with it because so much of my writing has been the weird thing about opinion, and my writing in particular that has seemed to kind of catch fire has been stuff about me, and it's my experience. And I still feel deeply uncomfortable with not sharing my experience. That's fine. It just feels very self-absorbed. And so I have a lot of, and I think I got like a criticism from a screenwriter about how my writing wasn't real writing because it was like memoir-esque writing. A long time ago, and it just like was one of those things that got in my head because he was such an established writer, and so I took it to heart. Like I felt like my writing didn't have any value, or it was a different kind of value, or it wasn't real writing. And so I still have I struggle with that a lot. Lately, I've really been struggling. Like somebody asked what's one of my biggest blocks. This is I think this is later in this question. What are my blocks and how do I overcome them? And this has lately been one of my biggest blocks is I want to write, for instance, a book, The Accidental Pundit, about how I ended up, because everybody's like, who are you and how did you end up here? Basically being a media personality. And that's a hilarious story that starts with me getting sober and ends with me being like BFFs with Glenn Beck. You know, how does that even happen? And I was like this libtard,
like working at Playboy.
Yeah. It was a crazy story, and it should be told, and I feel so self-conscious about telling it because it's all about me. And I'm like, maybe I should be out there like interviewing everybody and doing a more journalistic work with more integrity, and maybe I can do that too. But so for me, writing is not really a choice. It's always been something I had to do just to stay sane. And there's something weird about pen to paper, even just typing myself. When someone else is typing for me, it's like a weird chemistry where it's almost like there's intelligence in my fingers that's not in my brain. Because I don't use writing. I don't sit down and say, here's what I'm going to express. I sit down and I'm like,
what's going to come out?
I don't really know how I feel about this.
Right.
And sometimes writing helps me sort that out.
Right.
So for me, it's also just, that's why I probably should write The Accidental Pundit right now, because I've been asking myself all these questions of like, what am I doing? And what the hell is going on? And I think that no matter what, writing will help me sort that out.
Well, I think too, I mean, because I've told you this before, I ran into this when I started writing a book, because in my mind, you were the writer. Like, because it always came so naturally to you, because you'd been working on it forever, because it was such a like breathing for you, it was like, well, Bridget is my idea of a writer. I am not that. I don't have that. So why I can never consider myself a writer.
Yeah.
And then, but realizing I love, like, I could never write the way you do or write what you do, but I really like the act of creating a story.
Right.
And creating characters and I love the creation of it. And it's a grind and it's a pain in the ass and it's totally hard. But I've started to be like, oh, maybe I could do this. Maybe I should think of myself this way. It's just I'm a different type. I'm a different kind.
Yeah.
So people don't have to come to it naturally and be like you, where it's like, it was something I needed for my soul. It's just something, there are many different forms.
Ways in. Yeah. And a lot of people, generally people who write fiction and write it well, it's world building.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they love building worlds. For me, I like doing that, but I tend to lean towards scripts when I world build.
Yep.
And I think it's because I am actually very visual.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can see the whole story, and even if I can't remember it, I can see it. And so it comes more naturally for me to write in that genre or that format.
Right.
And that's the other thing is I think not limiting yourself as a writer to just one genre. So, okay, so I started writing personal essays just because that's what came naturally, or like blogging. You know, I came of age as the blog did. So it makes sense that it just came naturally to me too. And then...
And we had written scripts together for years.
Yeah.
Like we had written, developed a whole script world and all this stuff, but I still never considered myself a writer, like outside that space. Like I was like, we do it together and we can write together, but it was not something I was like, oh, I need to do this on my own too, until I found my own medium for doing it.
And I love the gonzo journalism pieces that I've done, like the one that I did about living in the one I did about Ashley Madison, the one I did about Om, which is the orgasmic meditation, which Diddle Club, which is a shame that that's down, but we still have a copy of it.
Mm-hmm.
I should almost do just like a reading of it to have, because it's so funny. And all these those pieces I love. So that kind of gonzo journalism I've really found that I love. And I would never have known that. That's like a whole other thing. And just my first editor of Playboy, Joe Donatelli, who I talk about all the time and love, he said all great columnists are journalists. And so because I always wanted to be really lazy and be like, can't I just write my opinion? And he would push me to dig deeper, and to a good editor will do this. They'll push you to really expand upon what you're trying to say, question what you're trying to say, and also go find more resources or talk to more people if you need more information. And he said all great columnists are really journalists. So that, just things like that, it just, the road just all of a sudden opens up so wide. And then stand-up is a whole different medium.
Then we have Adam said, how's your book coming along? What type of genre is it going to be? Well, we covered this a little bit, but how's it coming along, Bridget?
That's me being feral with myself. It's not coming along that great, because I always find a way to distract myself, and I have to just lock myself away and write. I just have to do it.
Yep.
I might have to just crank through it.
Yep.
You know, it's like I might have to just write the book. Because I'm trying to write a proposal, and I get so bogged down with like all the shit. I'm like, I should just write
the book,
and then I can add whatever like details and facts and things on top of the narrative arc. But I should write the narrative arc.
You should. That's actually a really good idea. You should just write the book,
blast through it. Yeah, like
not worry about the proposal.
Not worry about any of it. Just write the story. Mm-hmm. How did I end up here?
Yep, I think that would be probably the best way to go about it. All right. Then we have another question. Oh, also from Griff. What is the funniest moment while doing stand-up? Basically, your funniest moment, I think.
There have been so many. I think the funniest one was like the third time I ever did stand-up that I wrote about, when I was just in front of way too many people.
I was thinking about this example.
I had no business being on stage in front of 2,000 people. My third time doing stand-up. And just remembering being like, just get through the set. Just get through the set. And how I just like treated it like boxing. I was like, I would just circle around.
Well, you have to set the stage a little bit too, because it was completely the wrong crowd for what you were doing.
So I was working with a girl who's obsessed with anime when I was a life coach for children, which is terrifying, but also true. They were teen children. And I was helping. One of the things that this girl wanted to do was have me take her to the anime convention, Anime Con or whatever. They had a last comic standing competition, and she said, Bridget, you should totally go try this out. And so I did, and I did 3 minutes was what you had to do. And that was in front of probably 200 people, which was, even at that time, more people than I'd ever done stand-up in front of in my life.
Right. And let's be clear here. You had one set.
Two. I had done 2 sets. The first one ever at the Comedy Store, and the second one ever when I was doing my porn routine.
Okay. I thought you only had one routine, though.
Oh, yeah. I only
you
had
one routine, which was a porn routine. But you had no other routines worked out.
I had one routine, and it was all about how I'm addicted to porn. And which I was at the time.
And you can actually see it online. It's on YouTube, the porn routine, and in her Daddy Would Be Proud shirt. It's great. I loved that routine.
And that was the second time I ever did stand-up, by the way. And so I was riding high from that one good set.
It went really well.
After my first set, which was a bomb. Well, medium bomb.
Yeah.
I got through it. And I ended up getting passed through
to the finals,
which I thought would be maybe double the amount of people. Not realizing what a huge deal Comic-Con was the last comic standing was at this anime convention. And I think they just needed women. There weren't that many women. And I did some jokes about hentai, so they thought I was one of them. Not to mention, I was dressed up in like a doll costume because I figured, why not? I'll dress up. Now, cut to the day that I went and did my 10-minute set, and there were 10 of us, and I was 9th, which is the worst. It's just hard. It's a hard spot. The audience is tired. You're right before the headliner, which everybody wants to get to. It was a competition. There were judges that judged you after every single person. And I walk into the room that previously had a couple of hundred people, and there were 1,800 people, just all these blinking eyes. And I almost just turned around and walked out. I was like, no freaking way. And I have debilitating stage fright, by the way. Something I didn't know, because when I did that second set that you'll see, I was drinking. And I was like it's like when you're bowling and you hit that kind of, or playing pool and you hit that like
perfect zone
of 2 drinks basically, and you're kind of in the pocket. I was in the pocket in that set. And then in this one, I was sober because I'm like, oh, I had to drive there, and I just was like, just be sober. So this is my 4th set now.
Right.
Ever. And I ended up and I didn't realize really truly until I got sober how bad my stage fright is. But it was pretty bad, and I was just taking deep breaths, and then I had to wait, and the waiting for me is the worst part. I mean, I will take the bullet any day of the week before I will wait for an hour to go on stage, because I have such bad stage fright, and it just gets worse and worse and worse as time goes on. So I ended up, which is weird, because you wouldn't notice when I'm on stage that I have stage fright, but it's like crippling.
Right.
And so I get up, and I am not dressed up. I'm wearing my my Eddie Murphy pleather pants, and I'm definitely not one of them. And every single person before me is like, now, when Gal Gabor fought with the Predator, and then everybody had those vuvuzelas because it was the World Cup, and they were like, brr, brr, brr.
You were like, I didn't understand any of the jokes from any of the previous comics.
No, I had understood not one single joke told before me. In the 2 hours of comedians before me, I was like, I'm fucked.
It was all inside anime jokes.
I am fucked. It was like, they could have been speaking another language.
They could have been speaking Klingon.
It didn't matter. I was like, oh man. And they'd be like, and he'd be like, and then it did. And some punchline, and they'd be getting up in their chairs, and they're like, brr, brr, brr. And I was like, every comic going, I'm like, this is going to be a disaster. I knew I was in the wrong, they had picked the wrong person. And so then I was like, just get through your set. And I get up and I blank immediately. There's all these blinking eyes just staring at me, just a sea of blinking eyes. And so I just start in and I stumble through it and it's a little clunky. And it's all such a blur because I just kept going no matter what. I did learn like as much as you would probably learn in 100 sets in that one.
Mm-hmm.
Just from these girls in the right started booing, and then these guys were cheering, and suddenly I was like, I have so much power.
Uh-huh.
And what I should have said was, and then I got wet, like I was just getting aroused because I suddenly realized how much power I had on stage, and I was like, I could say whatever I wanted up here, like anything. But I can see why you would get so confident over time.
Right.
And that is like that's where I'd love to get to the point where you're just in front of 2,000 people and you're confident with what I learned was if I'm thinking, I should be talking.
Right. Talking about what you're thinking about.
Yeah, just abandon the set and call out whatever you're noticing. It's usually way more hilarious than whatever your like preordained set is.
Mm-hmm.
And then being able to come back to your set, that's like the true gift of comedy. Because if you're thinking, you're not connected to what you're saying and you're just reciting a script. And yeah, I was, even thinking about it now, I get like the sweats.
But still, I remember you.
And then the judges were like, we would have appreciated some jokes that were not just about porn. And the following week was the adult con or whatever. It was like the adult stars. They're like, we feel like you're at the wrong week here.
You're like, yeah, I'm at the wrong convention.
Yeah, it was like they let it was definitely, I could sense the like seething resentment that, the nerds were like, she took one of our spots.
Right.
This girl who does not belong clearly at all.
Just because she's wearing pleather pants. You wrote about it for PHETASY the old PHETASY when it lived. So maybe we can try and dig it up and find it and put it out.
Yeah,
on New
we
PHETASY.
should. On New PHETASY.
Yep.
Thanks for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully now you're going to get to know the person behind the person in Dumpster Fire. And you'll get to know me a little bit more. I love your questions. Please send them to weeklydumpsterfire@gmail.com. We give precedence to the people in the PHETASY community. So if you want one of your questions truly answered, join us in PHETASY.com. It's a great community. We're very supportive. There's a kind of ongoing conversation talking about all this deep stuff that we're covering and not so deep. Touch my bells and buttons. Don't forget to touch my bells and buttons. And tell your friends. And I'm Bridget PHETASY. Now go connect to somebody.